As a public figure, Brandon Lee is a strange case, as he has a ton of pop culture mythology built around his life, while no one ever really talks about him as a person or as an actor. All of the legend of Brandon Lee is told as an extension to his more famous father, Bruce, which as an enjoyer of 90s action movie weirdness, I consider an injustice. Checking Lee's IMDb when I started to write this episode was a shocker to me, because I consider him to be as much of a staple of the 90s beat karate movie as Dolph Lundgren or Cynthia Rothrock, and feel he deserves to have his own chapter when we get together and tell the story. As it turns out, he only starred in 4 of these American movies, and I don't even like all 4. But each of the 4 had something about them that was an exemplar for the decade. Yes, even Laser Mission, debate me in the comments if you must. I was severely tempted to do the Roundup episode on Showdown in Little Tokyo, but that would make 2 buddy cop movies in a row, and also, by far the most interesting thing about Showdown in Little Tokyo was the fact that the script eschewed the slight homoerotic undertones of the buddy cop genre in favor of having Brandon Lee's character openly and repeatedly compliment Dolph Lundgren's enormous penis. And that doesn't warrant much discussion. The artistic choice speaks for itself. I'm not kidding about that.
I saw you strip down for that hot tub. I'd be frightened too.
Kenner, just in case we get killed, I wanted to tell you, you have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man.
Thanks.
Ultimately, I chose a movie starring Brandon Lee where his position as the lead had the most impact on the shape of the film, which ended up being the highest quality thing he had done by far. It was good looking, well made, and much smarter than you would expect. And if you want to talk about Hollywood mythology, this film eerily echoes the real world legend of both himself and his father. No, no, no. That is nostalgia talking. I know this is hard to hear, but you're older now. All your katanas are in a box in the basement so your spouse won't yell at you. You have to accept that this movie was just schlock with a 90s hot topic concept of cool that aged poorly. The only saving grace it had was a standout performance by Michael Wincott, who probably deserves 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these videos himself. And the only reason it's remembered was because of the stupid on-set accident that cost Lee his life. Had the prop department done their job that day and Brandon Lee got to continue his career, The Crow would be remembered somewhere alongside Laser Mission as one of those strange movies he made while he was establishing himself in the industry. No, I'm talking about a movie that has the grimy throwback crime movie feel, bold takes on social issues of its day, well choreographed and unique action sequences, Powers Booth, all crammed into a neat 95-minute package that sticks the landing. I'm talking about Rapid Fire. One thing I really enjoy about Rapid Fire is that the act of watching it feels like unearthing a hidden gem. If you caught this on TV a few years after it came and went in the theaters and weren't paying close attention, it was very easy to lump it in with any number of interchangeable martial arts movies that got churned out in the 90s. But there are so many interesting details when you pay close attention. The best example I can give also really digs into what I was talking about with the Hollywood mythology of this movie, and on the surface is just a throwaway scene that's included in every film in the genre. So, you're sitting down to watch an action movie. You have already accepted that there is a protagonist that is about to beat the dog shit out of 10, 20, 30 men with his bare hands without fracturing a knuckle, jump over any number of railings without twisting his ankle, and have thousands of squibs go off in his general direction without being fatally wounded because the guy just looks too handsome for even the most loathsome villain to bring himself to shoot him. But screenwriters, with their ivory tower understanding the basics of storytelling, will make sure to jam in some perfunctory explanation for our superpowered protagonist, as if anything would adequately explain it if the audience really ever cared to question.
Fowle also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You don't seem to want to accept the fact that you're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best.
Ryback is an ex-SEAL.
Goddamn cook's a seal.
Shut up and listen. Expert in martial arts.
With a bouncer.
They do the same thing in Rapid Fire, but with just a little twist.
He's the only one who saw what went down.
Father's career army, deceased. Army intelligence. Was attached to the Beijing embassy in '89 when the shit went down. Medal of Honor. Taught the martial arts twice a year at Langley. Wing Chun, Kung Fu, Muay Thai.
The main character learned from his father, who is a famed martial artist with important ties to Chinese cultural identity from a Western perspective. The fact that Tiananmen Square and pro-democracy activism are part of the plot in the first act makes this even more explicit. Who does that sound like?
You sound like my father.
Full disclosure, I'm going to attribute a lot of the parallels between Brandon Lee and his character Jake Lowe to Lee. That's writing a bit of mythology of my own. Lee does not have a writing nor producing credit on this movie. The only thing he definitely had creative control over was the fight choreography, which he did with veteran stunt coordinator Jeff Amata, so it's safe to say Lee had some direct influence over the action sequences in general. Which is well and good, because those are awesome. But it's just as likely that the screenwriters were aware of the cultural commodity that was having the first Western movie with the son of Bruce Lee as the lead and leaned into it in the script writing. After all, the story was written by Sidney Cyril from the Demon Puppet movies? And Alan B. McElroy. Okay, that's a proper working writer. Anyway, whether it was Lee himself adding personal touches to the story between takes or a writing team that knew exactly what they were working with, Jake Lowe is inherently shaped by Brandon Lee. So I'm going to talk like it's all his idea.
Yeah, sure.
As a side note, there's something I'd like to say about movies in general that I think gets missed in present day, where there's a greater amount of parasocial interaction between the audience and the entertainer. Let's say you find yourself in a parallel universe where there was no senseless accident on the set of The Crow, and Lee got to be around to comment on Facebook posts with Don Wilson and Cynthia Rothrock. You could just ask him how much influence he personally exerted on the story of Rapid Fire. This man was a showman, from a family of showmen. He is not going to tell you the truth. He will tell you what makes for the best story. And that's fine. It's literally the point of the profession. Another place where Rapid Fire has a lot of meat on its bones is the subtle commentary on anti-Asian racism in America that is sprinkled throughout the movie. The film opens with Nick Mancuso playing Antonio Serrano, a Chicago mobster on his way down from the top, meeting Kinman Tao, played by Zima, a drug lord who got his start working with Serrano. Mancuso's character is interesting on its own for once again being a slight twist on a conventional archetype, which I'll get into in a second. Serrano starts out all smiles and asks Tao for a cut of his business to supplement his recent losses, claiming Tao owes him for getting him his start stateside. Tao, quite logically, responds to Serrano by beating two of his own men with a stick in a way that establishes how the final physical conflict will play out in the climax. You know, because this is a movie. Anyway, the second Tao defies Serrano, and anyway, he suddenly gets not only abrasive, but pretty racist, in a way that only amps up throughout the film.
Now you listen to me, you fucking little bastard. I got you started when all your couriers could deliver on the street with fortune cookies and chow mein.
Your boss, that, ungrateful yellow bastard.
Some chink kid over there in a black jacket! He sell me wet tang!
I always thought this was a neat dig at the model minority narrative about Asian Americans that I recall being prevalent in the 90s. All the white faces are friendly until the second an Asian character exerts any agency, and then suddenly things get nasty. But Pete, you might say if you've ever seen a movie before, Serrano is an obvious bad guy. Establishing him as both selfish and racist is a pretty obvious move that you see in movies like this all the time. If it were just the Serrano character, I'd say you have a point, but this comes up a lot, both among the villains and the characters that are generally portrayed positively.
What are you doing, Jake?
I'm hungry.
We could send out for Chinese if you like.
step out on that street, you're gonna last about as long as a new Ferrari.
It was self-defense!
Oh, you think the first cop you run into is gonna give you time to explain that?
It goes hand in hand with a motif about people using others, but it does have a specific flair of social commentary. I mentioned that Serrano's character was an interesting twist on an archetype, which is another thing that is easy to miss because Mancuso is very much playing the mafia guy from a movie. Chewing all the scenery and all the pasta, his performance does not miss a single cliche, but he leans into it so hard that it's very charming.
We came down the chimney. Oh, oh.
The twist is that Serrano is the heavy, with Tao being the main antagonist. Traditionally, the heavy is an agent of the primary villain who provides most of the direct conflict with the hero, but in this case, Serrano is a competitor for Tao, while still serving the same narrative purpose. Is this groundbreaking? No. But it's yet another way that Rapid Fire engages your brain just a little bit more than a dozen other similar movies you might have seen run on HBO at 7 p.m. I don't want to give the wrong impression. Rapid Fire isn't the Joy Luck Club. It's not the definitive story of the Asian American experience for this decade. Sir Anthony Hopkins was in no danger of losing his 1992 Best Actor Oscar to Brandon Lee. It's like a kicking movie about a kicking guy who solves his problems with kicking. And believe me, you will not be let down by the amount of kicking in this movie.
Hi, Frank.
Rapid Fire impresses me mostly because it rides this fine line of being a smarter movie than it needs to be in order to successfully be a kicking movie about a kicking guy who also kicks, while not feeling like it exceeds the intelligence of the film. Jeff Wincott is another 90s action hero who definitely deserves 1 or 2 or 3 Roundup videos on his own, whose movies universally take on social issues so much more complicated that can be reasonably solved through use of karate, that it comes all the way back around to being hilarious. Rapid Fire isn't doing anything like that. It has just enough more substance to it that it differentiates itself from an actual milquetoast and forgettable 90s martial arts movie like The Perfect Weapon. By the way, Michael Wincott and Jeff Wincott are brothers, so if you grew up in the 90s, remember, it was their decade, your ass was just living in it. As for Brandon Lee's performance, the physicality of it is very cool. I mentioned the stunts and fight scenes are great, and I'm totally going to play the part where he hits a guy with a motorcycle on repeat while I talk, just because I like it. Seriously, look at Lee's head when they connect. You can see where they switched to the dummy and the stunt driver, but in that moment, Brandon Lee is really hitting a stuntman with a motorcycle in a tight space. And you know from the lean back that they wiped the fuck out immediately after they cut. Also, a lot of his fight scenes have a really unique feel to them. I honestly don't remember if Al Young has an actual line in this movie, and they did nothing to establish that his character is a badass, except have him be played by Al Young and throw a knife at one guy. But when he and Lee have a fight scene towards the end, it really looks neat. Even though martial arts movies like Kickboxer showed a cultural fascination with Thailand in the 80s, I don't recall actually seeing any tie-ups or knees that look like Muay Thai before this scene in Rapid Fire. Yes, Kickboxer 2 came out a year earlier, and Sasha Mitchell made it look a lot more authentic than Van Damme did. But did you watch Kickboxer 2 when it came out? Did you? Did you? Okay then, Brandon Lee gets the credit.
Yeah, sure.
As for his line delivery, Brandon Lee keeps up the say words and be handsome school of acting that he had been employing since Laser Mission, but that's perfectly serviceable for a kicking movie about kicking guys. I'm more interested in the meta of his performance. Bruce Lee was notoriously aware of the connection between his persona as an actor and the characters he played on screen. It's why the more control he had over the choreography, the less danger his characters were ever in. Bruce Lee wasn't just making a movie about a character overcoming whatever obstacle through the magic of kicking. He was also advertising himself as this invincible martial artist, which is harder to do if you have a scene where Bob Wall or Jackie Chan get to land a punch. I get that same sense from Brandon Lee in this movie, but it's expressed differently. I already went into detail about how Jake Lowe, the character, is shaped by Brandon Lee, the actor. But what is Jake Lowe? Yeah, he's an invincible action hero who kicks everybody and loves the ladies.
You want to go out with me tonight?
But you know, he's also an artist. He has outspoken opinions about social issues. He wrestles with his legacy. It's just kind of interesting seeing what different actors put out there when tasked with playing a glamorized superhero version of themselves. Speaking of playing themselves, one thing I can't get over are the weirdly specific situations from movies with Brandon Lee that keep on cropping up, and I just felt like it's too specific not to be a product of Lee's input. Like how he and his love interests always seem to absolutely hate each other.
Oh, such a gentleman.
Such a bitch.
Sounds like you hate him because he reminds you of your father.
You don't know anything about my father, okay?
See that? Hey, watch it!
But the one that really sticks out is how the primary antagonist in all of his movies always gets killed incredibly, perhaps even extra dead. Klishnikov in Laser Mission gets like 3 movie deaths before getting blown up by the entirety of the film's budget. I thought I saw some shit when Cary Tagawa got stabbed to death in Showdown in Little Tokyo and then explodes for no discernible reason. I'm not kidding about that one either. But Rapid Fire's final showdown is really something else. The set piece for the final fight is on the L train tracks because it takes place in Chicago, and I guess they couldn't do it on Navy Pier or Wrigley Field. And they make sure to set up a spark from a metal briefcase to remind the audience of the third rail before having a metal pole fight. That, of course, mirrors the stick fight from the beginning on account of this is a movie. But then they also show trains going by. This is kind of neat for a set piece because, assuming you've seen a movie before, you can be pretty confident that the hero is going to overcome the villain here. Showing 2 related deadly hazards in the scene adds an extra element as to what could possibly happen and makes it feel less like a foregone conclusion. Tao is obviously going to lose and die. A simple movie would just have him electrocuted like they obviously set up. A clever movie would leave you guessing if it was going to be the third rail or the train that would be the element of his demise. But this is a Brandon Lee movie, meaning he gets hit with an obvious lethal amount of electricity, gets up inexplicably and unaccountably fine, then gets hit by a train. Magnificent. So I did this whole roundup barely mentioning how the main character arc is Jake Lowe finding something to believe in after being burned by a cause tearing his family apart, and working out his dad issues via a hardened Chicago cop and surrogate father figure played by Powers Booth. But that's fine. He's Powers Booth, obviously he did a good job, and the relationship between him and Lee gives the movie the minimal required emotional core to work as a story, leading to a sequel hook that was never meant to be.
Hey, you in or out?
We're in.
Ultimately, those elements of the movie are all the paint-by-numbers tropes that cause Rapid Fire to mistakenly blend in with the action crowd of its day at times. It's the unique stunt work, engaging meta relationship between character and actor, and smart little twists on the formula that make me actually love this movie. So there we are, another wholehearted recommendation for another underappreciated flop, made because I'm still not emotionally ready to do a roundup video on Boogie Boy.
Well, bye.